This is page 36 in our notes, using these colors. So we've got, this is lesson 2.2 that we're actually working on. It's talking about absolute value. Absolute value, which is actually the standard NS7. When working on absolute value, they have these weird lines, but really it just means how far is a number from 0. So absolute value is really just asking the distance that a number is away from 0. You can think about the distance from 0 on a number line if you need to, but it's really just the distance a number is from 0 on a number line. So some numbers are negative and some are positive, but their distance away from 0, like for example, negative 50 is still 50 away from 0. The negative just says it's on the left. Positive 50 is 50 away from 0. It would just be on the right. So the absolute value is always going to be a positive number. So if I draw a number line here, you can kind of make it a large scale. This is 0. Let's say that's 50, and let's say that's 100. Then over here I would have negative 50 and I would have negative 100. And so when I ask the question about absolute value, you're going to see me using these bars, and you may have seen these before. You just may not have known how to read them. So you see these big bars like this, one here and one here, and like 100's in the middle of it. And so they're asking you to say, what is the absolute value of 100? So like in quotation marks, like what we're actually saying, what is the absolute value of 100? Like that's how I read that. But what does that mean? I'm just asking how far is 100 from 0? Like that's the question I'm really asking. But this is how I read it. What is the absolute value of 100? Well, it's just 100 away from 0. So if I write it like this, I'm saying, what is the absolute value of negative 50? In other words, how far is negative 50 away from 0? It's still 50 away. Even though it's a negative number, it's still 50 away from it. We don't say that it's a negative 50. The reason being is it's a distance. And when you're talking about a distance that something is away from something, distances can't be negative. You don't go for a run and go 2 miles for a run and say I ran negative 2 miles. What if I give you this example and I say that? I'm asking, what is the absolute value of 50? It's 50. If I give you this example, I'm asking, what is the absolute value of negative 100? It's 100. Okay, I'll give you a couple more examples. Negative 347. Again, I'm asking, what is the absolute value of negative 347? How far is 347 from 0? 347. What is the absolute value of positive 347? It is still 347 away from 0. The reason why I put these examples in here is some of them are to the left and some of them are to the right of 0, but their distance from 0 is still the same. 100 either way is still 100 away from 0. The negative just tells you like if you were to graph it, it would be to the left or right. But when they're asking for absolute value, your answer is always absolutely positive. Your answer is always positive. Answer is always absolutely positive. So that's how you remember absolute value. Your answer was always positive. No matter what I told you in the absolute value bars or the brackets, it's always positive. So now I want you to complete some inequalities using absolute value. So the directions say, complete the inequality, and you must use the greater than or the less than sign. Remember, inequality, we're using these signs over here. So I'm going to give you some examples of inequalities that you'll have to solve. So we've got number 1 says absolute value of negative 17, and then they give you this box to compare, and then they have the absolute value of negative 30. So in other words, you need to solve, like, what is the absolute value of negative 17? In other words, how far is that negative 17 from 0? It's just 17 away. What is the absolute value of negative 30? It's just 30. So when you kind of write it like this and you write the positive numbers, now compare these. 17 compared to 30. 17 is less than 30. So I'm going to give you another example. You need to take the absolute value of negative 20 and then compare that to the absolute value of negative 50. So you have to solve these absolute values. Negative 20 is really just 20 away from 0, and the absolute value of negative 50 should just be 50. So compare 20 to 50, 20 is less than 50. So you almost have to solve the absolute values first to get these answers, and then compare these numbers, not the ones up here. Okay, let's do another example. Absolute value of negative 220 compared to the absolute value of 180. And then the last example is going to be the absolute value of 570 compared to the absolute value of negative 300. Give you a chance to try to solve those, and then I can help you out. So as I solved, I was literally just looking at the numbers because that's how far it is away from 0 and forgetting about the positive or the negative. So now compare these. 220 is greater than 180. 570 is greater than 300. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a story problem that goes on to the next page where we're going to graph it. So this is our story problem, and graph will be on the next page. So the story problem is that Mrs. Gonzo is flying 205 feet above sea level. A flock of birds are flying 50 feet below Mrs. Gonzo. A whale is swimming 320 feet below sea level. Mrs. Bramble is swimming 200 feet above the whale. A boat with Mrs. T is floating on the water at sea level. So the story problem has a lot to it, and then we're going to use that to help us with our graph. So I'm going to leave that there so you can kind of see this one, and so you can finish writing that. So there's a lot we have to do in order to kind of graph this and put this together here. So page 37, so I'm going to continue on. We're going to kind of draw this picture. So I'm going to move this up out of the way for just a moment while I draw the picture. So we've got, we'll call this right here our sea level. So this blue line is going to be our sea level. So sea level would be the same thing as like 0. What were we measuring in feet, meters? We were measuring feet. 0 feet is at sea level. So we know we're going to have things in our picture that are above sea level, and we know we're going to have things that are below sea level. What does that mean? These numbers down here are in the negatives, and these numbers are positive. So that kind of helps us when we're doing this. So we'll have to go back to